Hey there, in this video, we will look into Cloudflare Workers. Cloudflare Workers provides a serverless environment that allows you to build new applications without having to maintain the infrastructure. This Cloudflare Workers runs on the Cloudflare's global network, which we call as the edge location. Since this runs at the edge location, it provides us almost close to 0 milliseconds latency and we don't have a problem of cold start. We cannot compare Cloudflare Workers directly with AWS Lambda or Azure Functions as it has its own restrictions. The Cloudflare Workers have a restriction of around 1 MB to 5 MB post compression based on your plan type. Also, the memory is restricted to 128 MB of RAM to execute your worker logic. Whereas in AWS Lambda and Azure Functions, you could tune your functions and provide it memory to compute as per your choice based on your workload. Without wasting much time, let's get started into how we can use Cloudflare Workers. Before we deep dive into those, I see that around 90% of my viewers haven't subscribed to my channel. If my videos are helpful and teaches you something, I request you to please subscribe and press the bell icon. Alright, let's get back. The first step that you need to do is sign up on the Cloudflare dashboard. So you can go to dash.cloudflare.com and you could sign up if you don't have any account. I have already signed in into my Cloudflare account. Next, once you have a Cloudflare account, you could go ahead and install the Wrangler CLI. Now, Wrangler CLI is a command line tool which allows you to work with Cloudflare Workers smoothly. In order to get started, go to your terminal and you could install Wrangler. You can do that using npm install -g Wrangler. I already have Wrangler installed. As you can see, I already have Wrangler installed. So once you have the Wrangler CLI installed, you need to log in to your dashboard using the Wrangler login command. So you could find those information under Wrangler, get started. So once you have installed Wrangler, you could go and issue Wrangler login command, which would take you to your browser so that you can sign in to your Cloudflare account, and post successful sign in, it would redirect you back to your terminal. Once you have done that, you can go ahead and create your Cloudflare project. In order to do that, you can give a command Wrangler in it and you can provide a name. So in my case, let me call it as Serverless API CF. Once you issue this command, it will ask you for some of the information. So would you like to use Git to manage this worker? I'll say yes. Would you like to create a package.json? Say yes. Would you like to use TypeScript? Definitely yes. Okay, and then it asks you to select various options, right? Whether you want to use a fetch handler or a scheduled handler. In our case, since we will build an APIs, we will select fetch handler. Okay, so this will bootstrap the project for us with some skeleton. Okay, so let's wait for it to finish. Okay, this shouldn't take much time, so let's just wait for this to finish. Okay, while this takes place, I will pause the recording. Alright, so I already have project set up. So we can look at the project that is created. We can go within it and open it in Visual Studio Code. Alright, so I have my Visual Studio Code open here. If you look at this skeleton, it has a wrangler.toml file which have the necessary information regarding the project. So this file allows us to configure our workers, and there are much more parameters that you can provide here, which we will see later in this video. Since we configured it to use TypeScript, we also have tsconfig.json with necessary settings. Under package.json, we have few of those dependencies already installed, and those are Cloudflare worker types, TypeScript, and Wrangler. Okay. Now, in addition to this, we have a file called index.ts, which is the entry point. Under this index.tx, you see that it is a fetch call. And within this fetch, you have access to the request, any environment variables, and the execution context. And on receival of this request, it will just return hello world. Okay, so we could just try this out first before we go and clean this up. In order to run this in dev mode, you will have to run npm start. When you give npm start, the Wrangler CLI will create a local execution environment on port 8787, as you can see here. Okay, it has various options here as well. So if I press B, it will open up a browser. And as you can see, it prints hello world, which is correct. Okay, so as you can see, we were just printing hello world. And if I want to change it a message and I just save it, you will notice it detects the changes and restarts the server. If I go back to the browser and refresh, you should see the new change. Alright, great. So with this, we have our Cloudflare worker running locally, which is great. But as you can see here, it just has access to request. And if you had to build a REST API which supports get, post, put, delete kind of methods, then you would have to manually look for those types and route it across your functions. In order to simplify that, we will use a package called ptrouter. This is something that we would be doing next. Okay, so the first thing what we will do is we will cancel this request and we will go ahead and delete this file. Okay, so what we will do is we will create a folder where we will store all our handlers. Handlers are nothing but a specific set of code that will respond to certain kinds of API requests. Okay, so I will create a folder called handlers. At the root on the source, I will create a file called handler.ts. We will look into this, what it does. And as we could see here in Wrangler terminal, we have the main as index.ts. So we will also create a file called index.ts, which would be the entry point, and then route that request onto handler.ts, which will then route it to specific handlers. Okay, so in index.ts, what we will do is we need to add an event listener, which would look for a fetch request. Okay, the fetch will give us access to event, and under this we will need to respond with a specific request. Okay, so at the moment we haven't supplied anything in handler.ts, so we will come back to index.ts in a while. So let's go to handler.ts. In handler.ts, what we will do is, as we discussed, we will install a package called as itrouter. So npm install itrouter. This package itrouter will allow us to route the request based on different method types, the context path, etc. This is similar to how Express handles the routing. Okay, now since we have itrouter installed, we will bring in the itrouter into our handler.ts. From this itrouter, we will need access to request and to router. Okay. The next thing is we will create a router. Okay. This router takes in an option. This is optional though, but we would want to have our base route as API. Okay. If you don't provide this, then your workers will be made available on your route. Okay. I want all my workers to be present within the base route of /API. The next thing what we could do is use this router object to define what we need to do. Okay, let's say we could use something like router, you see, dot all handle routes. Okay, we could do router dot get. Okay, and we could say that if the route is hello, okay, call something known as, let's say, hello reference, right, or the hello handler. So we don't have this yet. So what we will do is we'll come back to handler.ts, okay, in a while, and let's go to handlers and create our first file called hello. Okay, so we go back to handler. We'll have a file called hello.ts. Okay, under hello.ts, what we will do is we will bring in request from itrouter. Okay, let's have a method called hello, which is async, gets in a request, which is of request. Okay, and here what we will do is let's just have a body, or we could say a response. Okay, and let it be something like message. hello world from Cloudflare workers. Okay, and what we need to do is every handler should return an object of response. Okay, and in that response you need to pass in the body. Okay, and that body should be JSON stringified. All right, so great. I have a very simple hello here. Now this hello I need to export default hello. Great. Now since we have this hello handler return, let's go back to handler.ts. In the router we say that when we receive slash hello, it needs to invoke this hello handler. Okay, so we bring in that import. Okay, the next thing what we need to do is this can be changed. This request could be changed. And what we say is if we receive anything else apart from what we have defined, okay, then we will return a new response. We'll do a JSON.stringify. We will pass an error and we will say requested route does not exist. And in addition to this, I want to pass the HTTP code as 404. Okay, as you can see here, I'm returning what I'm trying to do here is if my path has hello, it will go to the hello handler. But in any other path is requested, which we haven't configured, then it would go and return an error with 404. Okay, great. So now what we need to do is we have this router, but we need to configure it in a way that the receival message coming in from the index can be handled appropriately. So what we will do is we'll have a method which will export const handle request, which takes in this request. Okay, what we do is we use router.handler and we pass that to the request. Great. Now we have this handle request. Now this handle request needs to be invoked from our main index.ts. Okay, here we had respond with. So what we will do is respond with. I will call in the handle request from the handler. Okay, and I will pass in the event dot request to it. Okay, what does this say? Event dot handle request with right response. Why is this showing an error. Okay, handle request. Okay, let's go back to handler.ts. Okay, this should not be handle, it should be handle. Okay, so now that error is gone from here, which is good sign. Okay, great. So now we have the index.ts, which has a listener to fetch. On receival of fetch, it will pass this request to the handle request method from handler.ts, which is configured to use ET router. On receival of slash hello, it will go and pass this request to the hello handler. If anything else is received, then it will give an error with 404 saying the requested route does not exist. So let's test this out. So I do an npm start. Okay, so we have our stuff uploaded and available on 8787. We go back, I refresh, it receives an exception which is correct because I do have my method available on slash API slash hello, and we see we do receive a message hello world from Cloudflare workers, which is correct. If I request anything else which we have not configured, then we will get a 404. If you want to test this, we can go to inspect. Okay, can open the network tab, and if we refresh this, we see there is a 404 here. Okay, so we do have our APIs now up and running. So what we will do next is let's do something useful. Okay, what could happen is basically there could be errors that are thrown from any of our handlers. So we would want a global error handler that can catch any exceptions thrown from our workers and handle it gracefully. In order to do that, what we will do is we will create a error handler. Okay, and this error will receive an error, and under this I will do return new response. We'll just return, let's say, error, error dot message, or let's do it very simple. We will take this out. Here we'll create a error message. Okay, this error message could be error dot message, or we will call it server error. And here we will have error will be message. Okay, and the status would be either error dot status, or it will be 500. Okay, so what does this say? Is not assignable to parameter. What we will do is for it, and this says not assignable to type. Okay, because we'll need to JSON stringify it. So what I will do is I will do it here itself. Listen dot stringify. Okay. Right. So we do have this. Great. So now what we will do is we will go ahead and create. Let's have something like get task and create task. A very simple, which doesn't look into any kind of a database, but it's something static. So let's go ahead and create something known as get task.ts. Similarly, I have a will have a method called create task.ts. Okay. So let's go under get task.ts, and what we will do is same. We will import request from et router. Okay. Have a method called get task. Will be async request. Will take in request. Okay. I'll just copy this and keep because we will need for create task as well. And when we want a get task, we will need it. We will pass a particular ID in the params, right? We need to get hold of it. In order to get hold of it, what we will do is we will use a destructuring, and we will do that destructuring from request.params. Okay, and we will pass it as ID. So we will see where this ID is even refer. Okay, so what I will do is just give any for now here. Though this is not suggested, but for the simplicity, I'll just use any for now. And what I will do here is I'll just return a new response with json.stringify, and under this I'll have message, and I'll say task ID received. Okay, so this ID will need to come from the URL, okay, which we are fetching from params. So let's see how we can configure this in our ET router. So here I'll do export default get task. In create task, I will just have, and we will fill this method in some time. Okay, so we'll go back to our handler.ts. In handler.ts, what we will do is we had this route, correct? So I'll create another route dot get would be called task slash. We saw that we needed an ID, so we need to give colon ID. The same name is something we need to configure in our handler, that is this one. Okay, so if this was name, then here also it would be name. I have it as ID here, and on receival of this request, it needs to pass this on to get task handler. Okay, similarly, what we will do is if there is a post request that comes in for that task, we need it to go to create task handler. Okay, so let's go into the create task handler and let's define a very simple task. So let's say the request body for our create task is, let's say we'll call it interface create task CTO, and under this it could have a ID, which is a string. It could have a title, which is a string again, and it could have a description, which could be a string again. Okay, very simple request DTO called create task DTO. And under this, we'll need to fetch the request from the body, right? In order to get the body, we will have to use this request JSON. Okay. Now this request.json returns a promise. So we will need to await on this. And this body will be of type create task DTO because we know what it will be passing. Okay. So cannot invoke an object which is possibly undefined. Okay. So what we need to do here is, so what we could do is have an await, okay, request.json. Okay, so basically we know that all the requests will come in from the handler. So we don't need to worry about this being undefined. Okay, so here we get the body, and what we will do is very simple. We will just return a new response json.stringify. We'll just return the same body for now, and the status code, since this is a post, we need to be 201, that is created. Okay, so we have this create task method as well. We have get task which takes in an ID, and we have configured them in the handler. One of those things is this error handler we had defined, but we haven't configured this, right? So if you notice, this error handler is not at all referenced somewhere, or it is not invoked. So this error handler was basically for the case wherein our Cloudflare workers return some kind of an exception, and we want to gracefully handle it. So in order to do that, what we can do is in this router.handle, we could also give .catch here, and under this catch, we could configure it to use this error handler, which we define on top. Okay, so great. So I save it. See, it is all uploading our files. It's good. Now, in order to test this, we need a REST client. You could use Postman, Insomnia, VS Code extension like Thunder Client, etc. I would be using a simple extension called HTTP client. So I already have made a video on how to use this. So I'll reference it in the description as well as in the info card. So here I will define my host. Okay, my host is HTTP localhost colon 8787/API. Okay, we had a method called /hello. Similarly, we have a method called task some ID, let's say 1. We can say that the content type is application slash JSON. That's okay. And similarly, we have another method which is for create, which is post, right? And we saw that it set task. It takes content type as application JSON. Okay. For get, we don't need content type. Okay. Application JSON, and it used to take a body, had ID, right? Had a title, and a description. correct? So let's first run the hello to see if everything works good. It says the connection was rejected. Okay, so let's run this method again. Let's wait for it to upload. HTTP. Oh, there is some problem with the path. Should just be this. It has added an additional bracket. That's the reason it was behaving odd. Okay, I do a send request. You see, it has executed with 200 OK. Hello from Cloudflare workers. If I run the get task, it says task 1 received, and this 1 is coming in from here, right? Which we, if I had put it as 10 and does, it will say task 10 received. Similarly, we can do a create. It returns, and you see 201 created. So with this, we have our Cloudflare worker serving three handlers: hello, get task, and create task using UT router. So the next step, what we will see is how we can basically publish this onto a Cloudflare. Okay, so publishing this is very simple. So what we would do is, let's go to our command line. Okay, and give a command called npm run deploy. Okay, so what this will do is, this is build and publish this onto your Cloudflare account. As you can see here, it has published it to serverless API cf.durgadas.worker.dev in our case. And this subdomain is the name that is configured in wrangler.toml. Okay. So in order to see if everything is fine, let's go back to the Cloudflare dashboard. Let's refresh. You can see this. Okay. As you can see, serverless API CF is present here. Okay. And we have used 0 requests. One of those things that I forgot to mention is that Cloudflare has a very generous free tier, and that provides us with 1 lakh requests per day. That is 30 lakh requests per month. Okay. So this should be more than enough for any of our simple sites. Okay, as you can see, we have this serverless API CF, which is deployed as a worker on Cloudflare. So in order to test, what we will do is, we will copy this domain and we will run our tests again. So the only thing what I will do is, I will change this host to point to our Cloudflare domain, and we will run and see if everything works good. You see, it still works the same, no problem whatsoever. And you see, it is pretty fast. Okay, there is no problem of cold start, etc., since it runs at the edge location, which is very close to your origin. Okay, so you saw how easy it is for us to host our APIs on Cloudflare in no more than 10 to 15 minutes once we start writing the code. Lastly, what we will see is what are some of the configurations that we could do in wrangler.toml. Let's say you already have your own website and you want to host certain APIs at a particular domain. right? So now this Wrangler supports you a lot of options. So if you go back to their documentation under Wrangler and look at the configuration option, they have lot many configuration, like you could disable the workers dev domain, you could specify the route, you could define something like a key value namespace, you could have environment specific options, etc. So you can go through these configurations to get more information. What we will do basically is we will go back to our Wrangler configuration file. What I will do is I'll say that workers dev to be false, which indicates that I don't want my APIs to be available on the workers domain. Okay, I want this to be there in place, but I don't want it to be made available on the workers subdomain. Rather, I want it to be made available on my own website domain that I own under a specific path. Okay, so in addition to that, I'll say I want this to be minified, that is, I want this to be compressed so that I'm well within the limits of Cloudflare. The next is I define route and I say, please deploy these workers on my domain, that is durgadas.in/API/star. I want all of those to be available within this subdomain. One thing you need to keep in mind is the domain that you mention here should be managed by Cloudflare. You may have your own website that you may have purchased with GoDaddy, Namecheap, etc. Once you purchase, those domain needs to be handled using Cloudflare. So you will need to come and specify your domains here. Okay, so I already have a domain which is configured by Cloudflare. So I am good here. So what we will do is let's deploy the changes that we have just made here. Okay, so for that, I just have to run npm run deploy. You will also notice now the size is pretty less since we have minify equal to true. Okay, so if you look into this option, now it is around 0.78 KB, which is way less than 1 MB. And now you see it is published to my this route. Okay, so what we will do is let's go back to our test and let's now if we run this, what should happen is it should fail because we are still using the workers subdomain and we had configured in our toml file to have the workers dev option as false. So these workers are no longer deployed on our workers dev subdomain. Rather, now we had configured it to use my actual domain. So I can go ahead and replace this with my actual domain. And now if we run this, it should still work. You see, now it's all hosted on my own domain and everything works well without any problem. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share as part of this video. If this was helpful and you learned something new, then please do subscribe to my channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay notified on all the videos that I publish. I will see you in the next video. Until then, happy learning.